Welcome to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show.
Unlocking Your Truth is a radio show and podcast. It's a talk show, and we broadcast from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation from CIVL on 101.7 FM. We broadcast across the Fraser Valley in British Columbia, Canada, but you can catch the show on all major podcasting platforms, and you can see over 300 past episodes there, all by going to drlesliephillips.com. We also live stream the show on our Awaken Your Psychic Abilities Facebook group and on my YouTube channel. And so if you follow me in either of those venues, you will be able to participate in the chat room, because after all, it is a chat show. So
Is it?
Sense that we should have a chat room, doesn't it?
I guess.
Well, tonight's episode, listeners, is about forgiveness. And every week on the show, we have a different topic under the general umbrella of metaphysics, spirituality, self-development. And so tonight we're talking about forgiveness. And what is forgiveness? And what does it mean to forgive someone? And is it something that you might like to do?
Or maybe need to do at some point in time.
Yes. And so let's talk about forgiveness by talking about a few other circumstances around the idea of forgiveness. Because if we are in a state of absolute acceptance, there's nothing to forgive. If we are in acceptance, there's nothing to forgive. If we are in a state of at oneness, complete acceptance, then there's nothing to forgive, is there? And our true state of being is a state of at oneness, is a state of love, connection, and acceptance. So the ultimate truth is there's actually no need to forgive, except here on our planet, in our human condition, we get into situations where we blame, where we judge, where we criticize, where we feel victimized, where we feel hard done by, where somebody else has done something to us and we want to exact revenge. And we want that person to be punished. Excuse me, we want them to be punished for what they did, and so on. And so we get ourselves tangled up in these lower, denser vibrations of emotion. Blame, judgment, criticism, victimization, revenge, wanting punishment to happen. And when we do that, obviously we're not in a state of acceptance, and we're not in a state of forgiveness. And forgiveness is a little stop on the way to acceptance, really, in this scenario.
Isn't acceptance a stop on the way to forgiveness?
Say that again? No.
Isn't acceptance a stop on the way to forgiveness?
No, forgiveness is a step on the way to acceptance. Because acceptance is an ultimate state where you accept everything and everyone as it is. Forgiveness is the transition that says, you did that, but I forgive you, now I accept. The vibration of acceptance is actually higher than the vibration of forgiveness.
Really?
Well, forgiveness is a process of letting go. I have forgiven, I've let go, but I haven't really, because I'm still remembering this thing that I've forgiven. Acceptance is,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm just thinking the higher vibration. If I guess one is actually, when you think about, one is more or less an outward emotion or vibration, whereas one is an inward motion and a vibration, which is more important than an outward one. Yeah, I guess you're right.
I wouldn't think about it. I'd just look at the vibration of it.
Yeah.
So you can be in a state of you can be in a state of forgiveness, and you can be in a state of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So let's think about, everybody think about now, somebody that you haven't forgiven. Something
Including
that,
yourself.
pardon?
Including yourself.
You could think about something within yourself that you haven't forgiven. And in fact, that's often the last person that we need to forgive on our journey to acceptance, is to forgive ourselves. So think about that thing that you haven't forgiven and allow yourself to be in that vibration, having those thoughts and feeling those feelings. Is the energy flowing? Is the energy stuck? Is the energy going round and round and round and round? Notice. Notice when you contemplate, when you meditate on this person that you have not forgiven. Can you move forward unless you forgive? And the answer to that is no. Because while you have not forgiven, you are still in hurt, blame, judgment, criticism, victimization, and so on. And often mostly there is a level of resistance involved in all of those vibrations and in all of those scenarios. And so if there is resistance, then there's a level of stuckness. You are stuck in that place until you can forgive and accept. You can't move on. And, some things, I guess, are easier to forgive than others. How can you forgive the drunk driver that runs over your best friend? That's hard, isn't it? And so, and here's another question. Is it necessary to go through forgiveness to get to acceptance? And I don't think it necessarily is. I think you can move straight into acceptance. Because acceptance is not a vibration where we're condoning something. It's not a vibration where we say, I agree with that, well done. It's just, I accept that has happened and that this is the situation. There's no resistance in acceptance. So you could jump straight to acceptance, or if you can't quite get to acceptance, you can work on forgiveness in order to help you let go so you can accept. So if you're listening in the chat room, let us know, what was your example of something that you have yet to forgive? So
I
what
was
does it,
I was listening. I was searching inside myself, and I really I know I really didn't find anything. I think I'm pretty well cleaned up when it comes to that.
yeah, me too.
You too.
But I'm sure we've both been on a journey where that wasn't the case.
Oh no, definitely.
Yeah.
No,
So what
definitely.
does it mean to forgive somebody? Right? So to forgive somebody, you're not saying I agree with you when you forgive somebody. You're not saying, you know, well done, way to go. You're not condoning it necessarily, but you are letting go of those vibrations within yourself that are damaging to you. All the ones we spoke of earlier. Blaming someone, judging someone, criticizing somebody, feeling like the victim, feeling self-righteous, advocating for revenge and punishment for the one that did something to you. That keeps you tangled up in a painful, painful place when you have not forgiven somebody, and it keeps your energy tied up in that occurrence. And I suppose many people hang on to things for many years, don't they? Sometimes
Oh yeah.
people will hang on to something for a whole lifetime. Sometimes communities or countries will hold on to something for generations or hundreds of years and just keep perpetuating this energy of blame and judgment and victimization and fighting to have victory and revenge as the righteous one.
It's sort of like painting yourself in a room. You know, like you're painting the floor in a room, you get yourself painted into the corner, and even though you know it's wrong, you still insist on it being on your being right. You know,
Well,
like you're.
you don't necessarily, well, what do you mean when you say even though you know it's wrong? I think that you are not conscious. You're not particularly conscious. When you're stuck in ideas of right and wrong, if you're conscious and you can take a spiritual perspective on that, right, then you're not caught anymore.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like you paint yourself into a corner, you're sitting in this corner, and you don't see anything wrong with it. You know, like it's and
Oh, I
other
suppose.
people could be telling you, look what you've done. You know, all you're doing is making your life more difficult by believing this belief that everything is okay. I always think about that lady that we saw during one of our workshops, whose I think a son or daughter was killed by a drunk driver, and she ended up doing drugs, going to drugs and things like that. And it was years later, and she stood up in the workshop and said, I used to be really angry at this man, and I used to hate him, and you could just see the steam. You could literally see and hear the steam going up. She was so still into this, but she refused. Like she couldn't see that. She couldn't see that she had put herself in that place, and she couldn't get out of it.
And I think that she thought that she'd forgiven him and moved on, actually.
Yeah,
And
she thought.
and so sometimes that, yeah, that can happen, that you say, well, I've forgiven that person.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, let me tell you the story of the terrible thing that they did.
Yeah, how angry I am about it. And she was still in this anger. It was really interesting because she said, I've forgiven them, but I'm still so angry with them, you know, like, and she couldn't get there, you know, she couldn't get that. And it was, how many, do I remember, like 7 or 8 years or 10 years after the death of her child? And I'm not trying to diminish that. I mean, that was, it's difficult. It's really difficult to overcome that.
Yes.
And I remember a story in that they used to say when I was going to church years and years and years ago, and they say forgiveness is about, it's like this lady who was in a car accident. A drunk driver hit her and killed her husband and her daughter. And one day the fellow who had done the deed answered the door, and there she was. And he looked frightened, like, a couple of years later, this person who you've killed their family comes to your door. A lot of people expect a gun to come out, but actually she turned up, leaned up to him and says, "I just want you to know I forgive you." And that was it. She left. And actually that changed his life completely, completely turned him around.
That's great.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much today. It's not the Corey show, it's the Leslie show.
That's all right. I don't think forgiveness is a popular topic. I've watched the listeners kind of dropping off the chat room tonight. And so if anybody's left, tell us your story.
Lots of people left.
Yeah, they were like, forgiveness? Nah.
Well, people do this. They do this every week. They come and they go. But anyway, it's time for a break. Okay. And generally after the first break, we get lots of people that come on.
Okay. Welcome back, listeners. This is Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and tonight's show is the popular topic of forgiveness. We're talking about forgiveness, and we're trying to sort of thinking of some examples. And, one example I was thinking about before the break was when somebody becomes ill with a terminal illness. And often we will, it's so unfair that this has happened. How could God let this happen? Why should that happen to this person? They're such a lovely person. And then when we visit or spend time with that person, that's what we do. We say, "Oh, you poor thing. Oh, this is terrible. Oh, how can this happen to you?" And all of that does absolutely nothing to help and support that person who's been diagnosed. It just wallows with them in their misery, and doesn't elevate them into a healing space. Whereas if you can walk into that situation in a state of acceptance, well, this is what is, and here you are, and be with that person in that way, then that is a much more helpful vibration to bring into the situation. Well, I'm keen to see if we've got any questions this evening, to be honest.
We do have a couple, but I have a couple of other things I'd like to talk about first.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Sure. And one is, I think one of the more renowned statements that people use when you talk about forgiveness is, excuse me, it's easy to forgive, but not necessarily to forget.
Well, I would say, have you really forgiven? Have you really moved on? If you are still harboring that story. Because if you're still harboring that story, you're still, part of your energy is in the past, tied up in that. So truly move on. That really ceases to be a story in your pantheon of stories that you carry around with you. Why even need to refer to it if you've truly forgiven?
Yet people, I mean, it's about self-protection too. I think that's what people are looking at, self-protection. To not forget, to forgive, but forget to not get caught again. Maybe a better way to say it for people would say, well, I forgive them, but I'm protecting myself so I don't get caught in the same situation again.
Yeah. And then what you're doing is you're actually perpetuating the energy vibration that's going to do exactly that. You haven't moved on energetically when you do that. I mean, you're right, a lot of people do that. They hold on to energy of situations as a protection. Yeah, I don't want to forget that happened because I don't want it to happen again. But meanwhile, what they're carrying around is, I don't want to forget that happened, and I don't want to have it happen again. I'm resisting that happening again. So they're still in a state of resistance, and and therefore drawing it to themselves by cultivating it in that way. So the most healthy thing is to truly let go, to truly let go. Forgiveness is a letting go and a ceasing to hold on.
Now, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about a little bit was forgiveness and health. That forgiveness is not just for an emotional or spiritual release. Sometimes it's a physical release as well. And or people hold on to anger and pain to the point where they get sick, literally get sick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a healthy state to continuously carry those forms of resistance within your system. In order to be healthy, your energy needs to flow. And so if you are in blame, judgment, victimization, and all of those vibrations that go along with lack of forgiveness, your energy is not in a state of flow. And if you allow it to build and build and build and build within your system, and you do not release it, at some point it can turn into an illness. That's true.
I think a lot of people get to that point where they get sick. If it's not just, maybe not, doesn't come out in a physical illness, but it comes out in anxiety or stress or frustration. And of course, those things are as they say in the medical industries, those are the silent killers. So when you're forgiving, it's always good to understand that forgiveness is not just an outward thing to someone else, it's also for your own well-being.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I had a session with somebody today, actually, and it was touching upon this subject. And so there was, a husband and a wife, and one of them had been unfaithful, and the one that was the one who'd been cheated on was in a state of forgiveness. But the one that had done the cheating still couldn't come back because they could not forgive themselves. And often that's the case, isn't it? That we are the hardest on ourselves. We beat ourselves up the most. And we, are not forgiving towards ourselves and our own actions. But it's necessary in order to move on from a situation to be able to forgive.
True. So within all this, and you might find this to be a question that, I don't know, that's a little ludicrous in one way, but so forgiveness is the way to go. So how Dr. Leslie, how do you forgive? How do you do it? I know the Bible said forgive 7 times, 7 times 7 times 7. But how do you forgive? How do you get to that place? How do you get to that place of mind, that place of internal spirituality or spiritualness to forgive someone who's hurt you?
Well, the way I always do any of this stuff is through meditation and by using energy techniques. And so to work with, to basically energetically let go through meditation is the way I would do it. How do you get to forgiveness? Well, accept that you are in a place where you are stuck on something and it's not benefiting you, and then turn within and release and let go of that situation. And I can see people saying, well, that's easy for you to say. But I mean, all I can do is talk about how I would do it, and through grounding and centering. So if you can learn to center, place your conscious awareness in the center of your head, that puts your consciousness in the seat of the soul within the body, and it puts you in a state of non-judgment. If you seat your consciousness in that place, it's pretty impossible to judge and blame or feel like a victim. It puts you in a place of neutrality. So then from there, you can see your life and your life's creations from a neutral, non-judgmental perspective. And it enables you to look at the situation with fresh eyes. It enables you to look at the situation from a spiritual perspective, where now you can see it from everyone's perspective as well as your own. Sometimes that helps to forgive, is to be able to see where that other person was coming from and why they behaved that way and why they did that thing. And so seeing it from a spiritual perspective rather than from a body level of your emotions or your mind created aspect. And then there are energy techniques that we can use to de-energize the situation. And we always talk about grounding. Grounding is a great way to release the energy. And you might need to be releasing not just your own energy, you might need to be releasing the energy of other people involved. Because often if you've got a situation where maybe you've got two people that aren't forgiving each other and they're coming at each other, you may be dealing with someone else's energy. And so it's a case of dropping your end of the tug of war. It's a case of just letting go. And I teach lots of techniques to help with this idea of letting go, starting with grounding. So you don't, I wouldn't say you don't get to it, or I wouldn't get to it through a mental steps. I wouldn't get to it through thinking, oh, this, then that, oh, therefore. I wouldn't get to it through an emotional outpouring. I would get to it through a spiritual perspective. And I've just told you how to have a spiritual perspective on something. It's to be grounded and sit in the center of your head. When you sit in the center of your head, you're using your clairvoyance, which is the power, the great power of neutrality. And neutrality really helps you accept what is. You can look at the situation and just move straight into acceptance, actually, through that neutrality. That's how I would do it. I'm sure that there's plenty of other mechanisms out there, depending on whether you're coming at it from a psychological, psychiatric, I don't know, coaching, whatever perspective, but the spiritual way is through meditation, through cultivating neutrality, and by being able to release and let go of these things in an energetic way.
I would think that once you really hone the art of forgiveness, that the time variance from being quote unquote hurt to the forgiveness aspect of it shortens to the point where you may not even get into a situation where you need to forgive, where years ago that you would have to.
Absolutely. You just move straight into acceptance, or even amusement. Amusement is a great vibration to help lift you out of a state of non-forgiveness is amusement. And I'm sure, listeners, we can all think of something, some story, something that we did or that happened to us that we look back on and we cannot get amused about it. We cannot get amused about it because we haven't forgiven it and let go yet. We haven't moved on. We can all, so this is actually another simple way to move into forgiveness is to think about something that you haven't moved on from, that you're not amused about, and see if you can find something amusing about it. See if you can start to get a chink of light. But if you can laugh at it completely, then you've moved on. So laughter, amusement is a really great and can be another quick way to get out of lack of forgiveness. I mean, I think of an example myself. When I first started out doing this, I remember I had somebody attack me on Facebook in a very severe way. And it was very upsetting. I wouldn't say I was necessarily harboring, wanting to exact revenge or anything, but I was hurt by it. And it took me a while to let that go. Now, like this morning, I had somebody write to me, using the F word and various things. And I just, my go-to place was straight to amusement, And so it's true. You can get to the point where you are not invested in wasting your energy in something that's not helpful to you.
True. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess people when they talk about that Zen state, they look at, I guess, Sister Teresa, Gandhi especially, who had a unique knack of turning people's outward pain or aggression back in towards them to examine for themselves and come up and understand that there's no need for it. And I think he was a wonderful example of that forgiveness. There was no need for forgiveness because he never took anything on of other people. He just allowed it to. He was more of a mirror. He was a mirror.
And it's a good point, isn't it? That not even taking it on in the first place.
Yeah.
Another good example of forgiveness is, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. Jesus on the cross, in the process of being murdered, forgive them. And why was he able to say that? It's exactly what I was talking about a moment ago, that he was able to see the situation from a spiritual perspective. they didn't know what they were doing. They were unconscious. They weren't operating from a level of spiritual consciousness like he was. They literally didn't know what they were doing. They hadn't woken up yet. And so how can you judge someone when they are acting out of unconsciousness? All you can do is say, well, that's where they are. That's where they are on their road to enlightenment. And it is what it is. And yeah. Why blame and judge someone who's unconscious? Well, listeners, you've been tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and we're going to take another break. And after the break, we will take our listeners' questions. Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey. Tonight's show has been about forgiveness. So what questions have we got?
Hey, the first one's from Jennifer. Jennifer says, I still find it challenging to keep from falling into a downwards spiral every time I'm reintroduced to the energies of my outcome from my inability to have negotiated better. How can I find vibration? How can I find the vibration for forgiveness?
Okay. I think this is Jennifer talking about selling her house and not getting a good, blaming herself for not negotiating better. Let's take a look. Well, here's the first thing that springs to mind is bring yourself into the present moment, Jennifer, because there's nothing you can do about it now. That is in the past. I believe the deal is signed, sealed, and delivered. So it's in the past. It was really, you cannot take your body into the past and replay that event and make it have a different outcome. It's done. So we need to accept that it's done and pull our energy into the present moment and be where we are now in the situation we are now. So that's what I would say, a practice of being in the present moment. When you find yourself moving into the past, pull yourself back into the present moment and be in the center of your head so that you can be neutral, accept what is. This is what is. Accept what is, and forgive yourself. So you weren't perfect in your eyes. None of us are perfect. So you can release the idea that you weren't perfect as well. And you can release the pain of the idea that you weren't perfect. And allow yourself to move on to the next stage, free of baggage. I hope that helps.
Basically, it is what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to beat yourself up about something because that's the way it is in most situations. So this is from Anielle. Anielle says, are there, for a lack of a better word, rituals to help aid in this process, like burning sage or saying a mantra, etc.?
Well, if you like rituals, I'm sure that you could create a ritual around forgiveness. There is a practice of writing down the things that you are being unforgiving about on a piece of paper, and then letting it go by setting the piece of paper on fire and releasing that thing in the smoke. I guess that's a kind of a ritual, isn't it? And I think there are various versions of that. I think that the ritual of walking the labyrinth once a year on the winter solstice, and as you travel into the center, you are reflecting on your journey of the past year and all the things that happened into it. And then when you reach the center point, you're basically renewing yourself, rebirthing yourself, and letting go of the past and everything that was, and stepping into the next year as you come back out of the labyrinth. So that might be another ritual that you can use to let go. I'm sure that there are others as well, but those are two that I can think of off the top of my head.
I remember when we were in South America, that the thing that Steve introduced us to, the Chinese, like their balloons, I guess. And you have a little candle, and the candle heats up the balloon, and you just let it go into the sky. So if you put all your pain and your anguish and your unforgiveness in there, and just allow it to go away. I thought I want to pick up some of those, because those are really neat.
You can also use those for manifestation, putting all your hopes and dreams in them and asking the universe.
Accept them, yeah. Okay, so Letitia, I totally agree. People are much harder on themselves than anyone else could ever be on them.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And so this is also from Letitia. She says, if you're always forgiving others, wouldn't that make you a doormat? Or does it not matter, as that is just ego creeping in?
That's a really good comment. So it contains within it the idea that there's some form of weakness within the act of forgiveness. And actually there's great strength in the act of forgiveness. And it contains the idea that we're letting them get away with it, and they shouldn't get away with it. And well, that person is on their own path, and they're creating their own reality reflection by their deeds and actions. They're creating their own karma. And so they will meet the reflection of themselves along their path. You don't need to take on the role of God and enact revenge and punishment on them. And so, no, it doesn't mean that you're a doormat if you forgive and forgive and forgive and forgive. And forgiving something doesn't mean that you are, just because you forgive it doesn't mean you need to allow it to continue. So let's take the example in a relationship. Let's say your partner is repeatedly cheating on you. And you might forgive them, and then you might forgive them, and then you might forgive, and then you might say, okay, well, I forgive them, but I don't need to live in this situation anymore, right? And you can move on. You're still forgiving them, but you also have the free will to choose to remove yourself from a situation in that kind of example where you feel like, they don't deserve your forgiveness. You can forgive them, but just change the situation for yourself. So I think there's a difference there, to operate your own free will and your own choice in situations is very empowering. And the forgiveness helps you move on and exercise your free will and make your own choice, or it can do. Hopefully that makes sense.
I hope so too. Sounds like it makes sense to me.
Good.
I'm glad.
I'm sure Letitia will let us know if it makes sense to her.
Oh yeah, or not. Okay, this is from Jennifer. Jennifer says, I'm still extremely upset about having my career and my potential marriage decimated and being constantly energetically stalked. You taught me meditation. How does it work to keep me level? It says it does work to keep me level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so she's just making a comment on
And
that.
that meditation helps. Meditation helps, yes. It helps us cope with those disappointments of life. It helps us, and it helps us move on so that we don't have to perpetuate it on and on forever.
Meditation's an exercise. If you don't think it's working, you need to do more. This is from Carol. Carol says, it was perfect timing as I was just working with somebody's energy and needed to release and let go with your grounding meditation. Thank you, Dr. Leslie.
You're very welcome.
Okay, and this is from Shannon. Shannon says, hello, lovely Leslie. When going to release pain in my body down my grounding cord, my body doesn't always let go of the pain using the meditation or visualizing techniques. Do you have suggestions? I just went through a breakup with my beloved and I know I have forgiveness work to do. Can you look into this for me?
Yeah, I can. And sometimes, there are other ways of releasing energy as well as meditation. Exercise. You can release energy through exercise. So sometimes when people get pent up, it helps them to go for a run or something, because that literally helps them release the energy. Having a good belly laugh is a way to release energy. Sneezing and coughing are all ways to release energy. So meditation isn't necessarily the only way. And so Shannon saying that the pain doesn't, well, and here's the thing. Sometimes we might think the pain is not being released, whereas the pain is being released. It's just that there's quite a bit of pain. And as you're releasing pain, more pain is coming up to be released. So some things are easy and it takes us the snap of the fingers and it's gone. And some things, like the pain of rejection or a relationship breakup, abandonment, and all of those, core things that can come up, it can take us a little bit of time, because the most recent breakup can be connected to previous breakups, can go all the way back into childhood where we felt rejected by a parent or something. And so that it can be core pain that you have lit up in your system. So it may be that it's not that the techniques aren't working, but that you're just clearing quite a bit of pain. But I will take a look at that for you, Shannon. I'm also seeing that your X's energy is in your space. And sometimes when an energy feels overwhelming or like too much, or we feel like we're banging our head against the wall, why is this still like this? It can be because you're dealing with someone else's energy. So I would also suggest clearing your X's energy first, so that your space is clear, and then working on your part of it. Because it looks like you're not just dealing with your pain, you're dealing with his as well. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, I'm sure it is. And so Letitia said it definitely made sense to me, she says, and great advice as well. And Shannon says, I love running and laughing. Sounds good. I've been wanting to watch funny movies lately. Thank you. And thank you too, Corey. Love you guys. Wonderful.
Yeah, laughter is a great way to release energy.
Yeah. And the next one is from SG. I have a decision I need to make soon. However, I have been having trouble hearing what my heart and my higher self is saying. I feel more grounded than I have in a while, but it's still hard to tune in How can I get the answers I need?
Okay, SG. So SG, have you downloaded the grounding and centering meditation?
I think she has.
Good. Okay, so because here's the thing, when we've got a decision to make, there can be all these many voices, can't there? There's our emotions, there's our analyzer, our intellect, our thinking brain, there's our ego, there's other people and what they think, there's expectations, cultural expectations, expectations from you know, whether it's parents, peers, whomever. There's all these different data inputs, and it can be hard to sort through all of that and go, what's really me? But if you can ground and be in the center of your head, then from the center of your head, that's you, the real you, sitting in the center of your head, and you can look at it there from that spiritual perspective. And a very, 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 very simple technique is if you've got a choice between A and B, be in the center of your head, be grounded, and then imagine that there's a ball of light just sitting as if you're looking at a screen, and it's in the top center. And let your left hand represent one decision, your right hand represent another decision, and then let the ball drop and see which hand it lands in, while you're in the center of your head, and while you are not thinking or having your emotions overwhelm you, but you're doing it from neutral. So that's a very simple yes/no technique. So you could try that out, SG. That will tell you the answer that's coming from you, the higher being. That will tell you the answer that's coming from you as spirit, rather than all the inputs.
I think it's a lot like weight loss, and or habits. Weight loss is like a weight loss guru would tell you that you didn't put the weight on in 2 days. It took you your whole life to get to where you are right now, and generally it's it's difficult to take it off for the same reason, because we all expect immediate results to everything we do, and it just doesn't work that way. I mean, things take time, they take work, and no matter what it is, it just doesn't happen overnight. So the meditation, it's not to meditate, it's to have a meditation practice, a daily meditation practice, where you spend that time and get to that place each day so that it builds up. But expecting a relief immediately doesn't answer the need. And it's the same thing with forgiveness. Forgiveness is like a muscle that you have to exercise on a regular basis. It doesn't just come overnight. You just don't say, "Oh, I'm going to be perfect and godlike now and forgive everybody who slaps me in the face," because it doesn't work. It takes time.
Yeah, for most people. Yeah. All right, listeners, you've been tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey, and unfortunately, we've come to the end of tonight's show. Yeah. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please make suggestions of what you would like us to talk about on the next show. If you're in the chat room, before you leave, it would be great if you could write your suggestions. We would love to know what you would like us to talk about.
Give us a like on both Facebook and or YouTube.
Tell all your friends.
Tell all your friends. Yeah. It'll be wonderful.
We'll be back next week. And somebody said to me that listens to the show, are you all flooded? Because we always say at the beginning of the show, we're from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation. And I believe some of their territory's been flooded. But anyway, which we're not, I shouldn't laugh about that, should I? But anyway, if you're wondering whether we've been flooded, we haven't. We're all right. Thank you.
Bye-bye all.